So hello and welcome to this ARMA webinar on the role of patient organisations in rheumatology. My name is Sue Brown and I'm the Chief Executive of the Arthritis and Musculoskeletal Alliance, ARMA. We are an umbrella body which brings together patient and professional groups to work for better health services for people with musculoskeletal conditions. A few weeks ago, GIRFT published their report on rheumatology services with a host of recommendations for improvements. If you want more detail on that report, I will pop links in the chat later to a copy of that report and also to a webinar that GIRFT ran a couple of weeks ago that outlines some of those recommendations. But today we're going to focus very specifically on the role of patient organisations in rheumatology. So ARMA has always championed patient organisations as partners in delivering excellent MSK health, and they have a distinct and complementary contribution of real value. The GIRFT report points to some very severe challenges within rheumatology, and it makes a series of recommendations about how these can be tackled and reducing unwarranted variation and ways to deliver services differently. Patient organisations can support rheumatology services in implementing those recommendations and in facing up to those challenges. Many of the recommendations in the GIRFT report are the sort of changes that really should be co-produced with patients. That is absolutely vital, but patient organisations have much more to offer than that. And we've got two organisations speaking here today, but they are not the only organisations that ARMA represents. There are a whole series of patient organisations who can be helpful when delivering your services. But coming back to today's presentations, we've got two speakers who will be looking at different aspects of what patient organisations can offer: service improvement and patient support. And we're going to start with Dale Webb, who is the Chief Executive of the National Axial Spondyloarthritis Society. Did I get that right, Dale? And is going to be talking about the contribution patient organisations can make to service improvement. Over to you, Dale.
Many thanks, Sue. I'm just checking that you can see my slides.
Yes, that's working fine.
Well, thank you so much to ARMA for organising this webinar. I really appreciate the opportunity, and I know Clare feels the same, to talk about the role of our organisations in supporting the NHS through a particularly challenging time. And the GIRFT report makes very sobering reading, really, about the fragility of rheumatology services. The recent BFR report talks of a looming workforce crisis. It's a really challenging time, but I think there is some hope for optimism in all of this. I hope this presentation will demonstrate. Just some context, really, which is, we know through decades now of literature from health quality improvement internationally that if we want to achieve system-wide change in healthcare systems, we need to work on multiple things in tandem. Some of you may well have seen me present this slide elsewhere, but I want to just remind ourselves, because there are different levers that all patient charities are trying to use singly or together to create change. The first of those are top-down measures, often led by government and regulation. So top-down, what's called nudge measures or extrinsic measures. And so, for example, at NAS, we created an all-party parliamentary group on axial SPA specifically to have oversight of the implementation of the NICE guideline. I know Royal Osteoporosis also has an APPG and already has some fantastic success with this. So it's really important to work and create those top-down mechanisms. But of course, the best MSK program itself is a wonderful new opportunity to have MSK on the national policy agenda and to work with Andy Bennett and colleagues to promote this through that top-down push. But that needs to be supported by bottom-up measures that work with healthcare systems, that tap into the intrinsic motivators of clinicians who want to do really good work. And it's some of that work I'm about to describe for you. But other levers too, both professional levers that support education and training of clinicians, but also economic levers through which we affect the behaviour of the market through different economic signals. So at NAS, we're trying to affect all of those levers in a range of ways to ensure effective and widespread implementation of the NICE guideline and quality standard, and other patient groups are doing similarly in their areas of interest. So I'm going to talk about a particular program that we have been running called Aspiring to Excellence. I'll first describe the aims, backgrounds and design, and then I'll talk through the results to date and the key learning. And I'm delighted today in this webinar to be launching the first learning report from the Aspiring to Excellence program, and you can now download that from the NAS website. And I want to begin by offering some heartfelt thanks. First to the 6 hospitals, now 11 in fact, who were involved in the program and who have been amazingly engaged and committed during the most challenging time. I do want to acknowledge our sponsors, AbbVie, Biogen, Lilly, Novartis and UCB, whose funding has been instrumental to us undertaking this very ambitious improvement program. I want to acknowledge our outstanding delivery partners in the NHS Transformation Unit who have worked with NAS to co-design the program and who now lead the delivery, and they've been phenomenal and gracious and flexible in responding to the situation that COVID has presented for all of us. And I also want to acknowledge Rosie Barnett from the University of Bath, who led the interviews and the analysis that I'll be presenting in this report. So thank you to all of those. So the aims of this program are principally to encourage and recognise service improvement in axial SPA. And I spent almost 10 years working in the Health Foundation, where we promoted in the UK the use of quality improvement approaches within a range of conditions, but building on other work going on internationally. But when I joined NAS, it seemed to me there wasn't such a groundswell of quality improvement work going on in rheumatology. So we sought to try and create something at some scale, and in so doing, create a focal point to test and explore approaches to reducing diagnostic delay and improving patient experience and patient care. And through all of that, to start to create data and share that to help stimulate across the board improvements. And that's the process we're now, the stage we're now starting to move in the program. So this program was open to all rheumatology departments across the UK through a competitive award process, launched at BSI in 2019, with our first cohort announced in November 2019, just before COVID struck, and our second cohort, bravely willing to start this work during these times, announced in just May of this year. So our 2 cohorts, cohort 1, we have colleagues in Leeds, Berkshire, Fife, Newcastle, Sheffield and Southampton, and in cohort 2, Barking, Havering and Redbridge, Salford, Salisbury, the Royal Free in London and Leicester. So let me describe for you the program design. It essentially has 3 interacting elements. The first is the theoretical framework for management, which is grounded in systems theory and comes from the pioneer statistician engineer W. Edwards Deming and his system of profound knowledge, an approach he developed in the 1940s and onwards, which revolutionized Ford motor car, changed the Japanese economy, and in his collaboration with the statistician Walter Stewart, developed a whole bunch of things, including a clearer understanding of variation in systems and the use of something called statistical process control, a proven methodology used not just in healthcare, but in many sectors over many decades. Secondly, a learning system that brings healthcare organizations together. And the model we're using is called the Breakthrough Series Collaborative, developed by colleagues at the Institute for Healthcare Improvement in Boston. I had the pleasure of working with IHI colleagues for many years. They are the world leaders, and the Breakthrough Series has been used not just in high-income countries, but in low and middle-income countries with considerable success. And then thirdly, a set of practical tools to help develop and test and implement changes. Driver diagrams, which provide a visual display of a team's theory of what will contribute to the achievement of an aim. Statistical process control, plan, do, study act cycles, etc. Practical tools that we can teach clinicians to undertake improvement. And that model was developed by the Associates in Process Improvement. So very briefly, if you're unfamiliar with it, the Breakthrough Series Collaborative model takes a series of healthcare organizations through a journey in a network. They first meet, get to understand the basics of the model for improvement. And my colleague Lucy Davis and her team have been teaching the QI curriculum to the rheumatology departments, helping those teams identify their project aims, using root cause analysis type tools to clarify what they're trying to do and how they might do it, to create a plan, then go off and collect baseline data, then come back into the learning session and share their data, share their successes, change their ideas further. And so an ongoing iterative process that engages these teams and creates a shared respectful environment for people to talk about their experiences and trying to make improvements. There are 4 broad components. First, the educational input provided by NHS Transformation Unit, which I've just mentioned. Secondly, the protected project time for the teams outside of the network meetings to work together and implement their program. Thirdly, the networking opportunities that the program itself presents through the sessions, but also then through things outside of that. But then also really importantly, the work that the NHS TU does to provide improvement coaching to each of the teams. And again, to remind you that this program is being undertaken in the context of COVID, and it is truly humbling to see the way that clinicians have been able to stay engaged with this, despite the huge challenges they faced in their professional and personal lives, and continue to do so. So, what are the results so far, and what lessons have we learned? In the report, you can read the detail of this. So I won't go through the detail, but I will give you a top line. So in Newcastle, the training of community-based physiotherapists is now leading to improved time in referrals to rheumatology, vitally important to reducing diagnostic delay. In Southampton, they've implemented an inflammatory back pain pathway from primary care to ensure referral direct into rheumatology. And they've introduced an MRI spine inflammatory back pain protocol to reduce variation in imaging based on some pretty troubling audit reports. And they're now embedding that to ensure that the right MRIs are being conducted, again, to reduce diagnostic delay. Colleagues in Leeds have introduced a tertiary referral service, significantly improving time to diagnosis with very impressive results in a very short time. In Berkshire, colleagues wanted to focus on mental health support for patients, and particularly important right now in the COVID context, and through a series of integrated interventions have great data showing a reduction in the percentage of patients with abnormal HADS scores. In Fife, they've established a pathway for physiotherapy self-referral, and they've reduced physiotherapy DNAs, but they also feel that the program has helped them to reduce the chaos in the system that people are facing at the moment. And in Sheffield, the colleagues there have used audit tools to make the business case, successfully make the business case for an extended scope practitioner. And in the report, you can read in greater detail the improvement journeys those organizations have been through. So why does this program work, or why has it been proven to work through literature going back really quite some time now? The first is that it does have a pedigree. There's a proven framework that provides a strong basis to build improvement work. So Dr. Patan in Newcastle said, QI is not really new to us, but it wasn't something we had been formally taken through, the process of what you need to do. This program is formalizing the process and giving us a framework to work on and proving on paper that what you have done has been more effective. Dr. Matzo Ortega in Leeds says, the program created a learning network so that participating teams could share experiences with each other. This was essential for us as it gave us the framework to work from. It helped us understand QI in general and made it easier to take the projects forward after discussing them and getting feedback from our peers. And a third quote from Dr. Dunkley in Leeds, peer learning and support is possibly the most important part of the program. The community of us made it fun, and it is always helpful to meet people with the same specialty. There are the same or similar barriers in every service. It's useful to understand how to overcome them or not overcome them, and to have the peer support of knowing you are not alone. So this program methodology provides a framework on which rheumatology departments can build improvement work. The second lesson learned is that the competitive program itself helps to foster motivation and improve accountability within the group. The accountability wasn't a formal function we set up in the program, but it's a shared sense of accountability to each other to achieve results through the program. So Zoe Cox from the Sheffield team says, through being in a planned program, it becomes more official. We competitively applied for it, ergo, we are going to allow time in our job plans to do this. The time awarded is nominal, but the process of acknowledgement is important. And in fact, I know through conversations with the teams that the fact that their trust really recognized their involvement in the program and had helped to support the changes they were seeking to implement. And Jackie Tompkins in Southampton says, it's an incredible opportunity to be part of this 3-year national program, to have the support from QI experts and learn tools to help make changes in the way we deliver care for our patients, and then test and retest these changes through regular PDSA cycles. I'm looking forward to moving into year 2 and seeing what further changes we can make. The third lesson is that this type of approach allows people to take the time that they need to really deconstruct the problem. And from that understanding, then construct some improvement aims. Dr. Halewood in Fife says, we have both done a little bit of QI and we're familiar with the PDSA model, but there's way more to QI than that. Certainly in the past, we have had ideas and solutions rather than drilling down and understanding the problem in the first place. Just trying to be holistic when you're planning your project, which is not something we had done before. I had seen driver diagrams previously, but found them a bit intimidating. Actually, wanting to use them and feeling confident with the tools has been really helpful. The fourth lesson is about measurement, but the role of measurement in understanding improvement, but also in creating a story of change. And I really love this quote from Dr. Thompson in Newcastle. The driver diagrams have been really helpful to write down and will permeate the way we work throughout the rest of our careers. And we will use the more formal structure where it's helpful, but also just to realize that the way to get things done within the NHS is to demonstrate the change, that story that you tell, that you say, this is what we tried to do, this is what we measured at the beginning, this is what it was like then, these are the steps that we took, and this is what is different now. These are really powerful stories that you can use with patients, with managers, and in your clinical work. It's trying to put some structure to the chaos that is trying to improve services within the NHS and within a busy department. I think that summarizes so much really of what this program is trying to achieve and how powerful it can be in creating change at a local level. Another lesson is the importance of team and structure and building in regular contact and project updates to maintain momentum in the project. And Dr. Chan in Berkshire says, the Aspiring to Excellence program has given us structure and focus to build on our work to achieve the best standard of care in axial SPA. We've embedded new practices into our patient pathway that have both spread and sustainability. This will ensure this continuous improvement in our service long after we have completed the program. And then finally, engagement, collaborating with the wider team. And again, Dr. Mark Ortega. The program has made us aware of our capability, not only of our limitations. There's no magic bullet here. Transforming a massive organization's IT system may seem like an impossible enterprise, but by sharing responsibility and involving our managers and stakeholders, we're confident we will achieve our goals, however long it may take. After all, this is about improving patient care. So, as I said, in the context of COVID, the fact that our teams have been able to stay the course, stay engaged with a formal program, keep the focus on improvement, and achieve the results they have already in the first year, I think is remarkable. And now NAS is considering whether to introduce a third cohort or possibly introduce a QI mentoring program to really help sustain and spread this work even further. If you want to learn more, you can find out more about the program via the URL on this page, or download a copy of the report itself from the NAS website. Sue, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dale, for that presentation. And I'm now going to invite our second speaker, Clare Jacklin, who is the Chief Executive of the National Rheumatoid Arthritis Society. Clare, just before you speak about just before you speak about what your presentation, I just wondered if you had any comments to make about the role that NRAS plays in service improvement.
Well, first of all, I am absolutely full of admiration for what NAS has achieved in aspiring to excellence. It is really fantastic what has already been achieved. And likewise, yes, we've been working with some various different ICSs across the UK in how we can perhaps provide support and co-production about improving systems, but more on an individual trust basis. And we can certainly learn a lot from what NAS has already accomplished. Is that okay? Can you hear me?
Yep, that's great. Thank you. So Clare is now going to talk a little bit about the role that maybe people are more familiar with that patient organisations can provide, and that is around direct support to patients. Clare.
Right. I'm just having a little bit of a mare with my sharing my screen, so I'm going to start again. Bear with, as they say. Right, here we go again. So thank you very much, Sue, for this opportunity. I think really what I wanted to try and encapsulate in my short presentation is the value of patient organisations in being part of the solutions and not just as an added extra. So we're far more than local support. Patient organisations can really contribute to those national policies, the service redesign, supporting healthcare professionals in their education, and we can influence those health beliefs and unhelpful behaviours that perhaps someone when they're first diagnosed might have, or the misconceptions they might have about their condition. And we we really reinforce some of those messages that are coming from the clinical teams. And we know that we make a massive difference to people being able to better self-manage. And we're already talking about supported self-management, which is what I'll go into a little bit further on in my presentation. So we have already heard from Sue about the GIRFT report, and it is essential that patient organisations are part of helping to deliver some of those recommendations, and we really can play a key role. And I've just picked out one or two of the recommendations to focus on. So if we look at quality statement, NICE quality statement 3 about performance data to assess and address root causes of delays in patients initiating treatment once diagnosed. And I think that's very key for patient organisations to be raising the awareness of these conditions to help improve that the pathway into diagnosis, and working with some first contact practitioners, similar to what NAS have done with the the physiotherapists, improving that time to diagnosis, but also raising awareness within the general public, so they're not ignoring the symptoms. And I think that's very key when somebody is first diagnosed. Having that support is vital from a patient organisation. And there's a quote that I thought I would like to share with you about when someone, it says, following diagnosis, they phoned our helpline and spoke to someone who was very supportive and helped me to process this devastating news. And I will focus on that devastating. It is really a bolt out of the blue for so many people to be told that they've got this long-term condition such as rheumatoid arthritis or any inflammatory arthritis. And it was through the our telephone helpline giving that peer support that they realised they're not alone and they don't have to handle this entirely on their own. And like NRAS, all the patient organisations working with rheumatology can play a key role. And there's an absolute wealth of information out there on websites, through our various different social media channels, and all of us can provide a lot of that. And one key message I would like to say is you know, you don't need to reinvent wheels. Use the resources that are already there. They're all evidence-based. We're very professionally run organizations, and you can rely on the information that all the patient organizations can provide, rather than trying to start from scratch, which I often see in different rheumatology units across the country. And certainly from the ICSs now being developed, you know, you come to us, use our resources where you can, because it's taken years of investment. We've worked with all our medical advisors to provide this sort of information, and it would be a shame not to utilize it in the best way possible. Another key point I pulled out of the GIRFT report was reducing the delays in switching to biosimilars. And we're all fully aware of biosimilars are playing a key role in reducing the expenditure really for the NHS, and quite right too, and we're very supportive of that. But getting that switching process done right at the beginning is again something that many of the patient organisations represented through ARMA played a key role in. We worked with NHS England to develop some excellent resources for the big major switch that took part there at the end of 2019 into 2020 for the adalimumab switching. And I do feel in some ways it was the best kept secret, because talking to many rheumatology units, they weren't aware of these wonderful resources that had been developed with patient organisations like ourselves, NAS, Psoriasis Association, Crohn's and colitis. And right across the board, we worked closely to get the information for the nurses. We felt nurses had been missed out on the development of those information about what a biosimilar is, how it's going to have an impact on somebody's life. So there was a nurse briefing document. We developed a template letter. Again, all the patient organisations working together so that units could use them. And a frequently asked questions document already prepared for patients to get them to agree to being switched if that was the appropriate thing. And again, all these resources that we've worked on collaboratively as patient organisations, I do feel they've been underutilised, but they can play a key role in making that whole transition to best value biologics to work smoothly. So utilise them where you can. And just recently, there's been some EULAR recommendations that were published, and I'm not going to go into all the details. I will share. You can have a copy of these slides afterwards if you'd like. I'm sure Sue will be able to arrange that. But one of the key areas was to enable members of the rheumatology multidisciplinary team to be able to provide and signpost continuous and appropriate measure of support to enable better RA patient self-management. And I think that's really vitally important for all people with inflammatory arthritis, not just at the point of diagnosis, but continuous opportunity to learn about the disease, learn about what's happening in rheumatology, have access to new developments, access to potential research, etc. And that's all part of the self-management pathway. And that's where patient organisations can play a key role. And I'm going to just very quickly go through some of these recommendations. And this is where, as I said, patient organisations can play a key role. So that healthcare professionals should encourage patients to become more active partners in their care. We hear a lot about shared decision making, but patients can only really have that ability to share decision making if they understand what their condition is and what the alternatives are, what's going to work with their lifestyle. So patient education should be the start point and underpin all self-management interventions. Self-management interventions that include problem solving and goal setting. Again, this is very difficult to deliver in a clinical setting in the space of 15-20 minute consultation when there's so much else going on. That's a key role that the patient organisations and all patient organisations will offer support in supported self-management skills. Healthcare professionals should actively promote physical activity at diagnosis and throughout the disease course. And there's many well-being courses that ourselves, Arthritis Action, NAS, all deliver. Make sure that you're aware of them and signpost to them. Lifestyle advice, again, it's not just about the condition that somebody has, it's about the impact on their entire lives, on their working lives, on their family lives, on their ability to perhaps start planning a family, etc. That's the sort of role that patient organisations are perfectly in a good position to be able to provide support, help, and peer support as well. And it is all around the emotional well-being. Many people when they're first diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis will of course go through a stage of grieving for the life that they thought they were going to have, and it feels like the rug has been taken out from under their feet. And that's where the ongoing support and the ability to have that extra time to spend with individuals is what the patient organisations can offer. And I think it's really important that all healthcare professionals are aware of where to signpost and make themselves aware of all these wonderful resources. We don't want to keep it to ourselves. We want to share it with all of you. So please do make time to research what's out there and make use of it. So NRAS can help to provide high quality evidence-based information and education. And I really make a thing about focusing on the word supported self-management. Sometimes individuals can feel that when you talk about self-management, it's about doing it on their own and being left to their own devices. And that's not what we mean. And sometimes language can be quite a barrier for people engaging in supported self-management. And I wanted to share just two services that we can provide. And that's one is the new to RA Right Start. It's a referral service. So anybody within rheumatology, it could be the consultant nurse, physio, OT, can refer a patient directly for an intervention with NRAS. They will get an hour-long helpline call and then a tailored package of information specifically for where they're at in their life. If they're working, if they're retired, if they're about to go off to university, then their needs will be quite different. And then they also get an opportunity for some peer support. So it's a very straightforward process. There's a referral button on our website. Then they will get a package of information. And this is all the resources that we can provide free of charge to rheumatology to have displayed and to share with colleagues about how the system works. And it does help tick that box of quality standard 3 about the importance of educational activities that supported self-management provide. And it is recommended on the NICE platform as well as a shared learning database, so that you can actually access the information there. And the other thing that we've just launched is self-management individualized learning environment. It's a modular format, a bit like Netflix. You can choose which module you'd like to do as a patient. But it also is proving that for people new into rheumatology, it's an excellent way of learning about what matters to individuals diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis. And in fact, it kind of ticks all the boxes for some other forms of inflammatory arthritis. But we are NRAS and we focus primarily on RA and JIA. But the first 4 modules are based on, foundation module, newly diagnosed, and managing pain and fatigue. And we're going to be launching another one on medication and understanding medications. And we've developed this through a panel of patients and healthcare professionals at every single module. And we will be adding 4 more modules next year. This is an example of what it looks like. And as I said, you choose which module you would like to do. And I would highly recommend you take a look at those. It is properly evaluated. We're using the RAID scores, and that way we can actually then look at the individual and think, where are they struggling most? What is it that's causing them the most issues? Is it about the emotional well-being, or is it fatigue, or is it pain? And then we can actually get back in touch with them and suggest other ways that they can learn more and find out where their support can come from. So that's really important to us, and we'll be able to measure the success of the program going forward. And just for those of you who work in perhaps high density populations of from South Asian patients, it is very difficult to get health information in different languages, we know, but we've utilized the medium of a lot of videos to get those key messages across around COVID, around managing RA, etc. And you can translate most of our website. It's not absolutely perfect into Hindi, but there is lots of information there in Punjabi as well. So again, signpost your individual patients from those populations to that resource. And then really, there are many other things that all patient organisations offer, but just to give a recap of what we can offer at NRAS, we have wellbeing sessions, we have wellbeing courses, 6-week online courses, we have a peer support helpline, of course. I mentioned Right Start and Smile RA. But we also have the largest online RA community in the world on a platform called Health Unlocked. And that can really offer great support to individuals. And we monitor it very carefully so as to ensure that there is no misinformation being shared there. And of course, webinars like this, we also host, we call them Room Zooms, and we have Facebook Lives on a regular basis, as do most of the other patient organisations on particular topics. So do make yourself aware of what we can offer. And I'll stop there, but hopefully that was a whistle-stop tour of what patient organisations can offer you and your patients and your rheumatology service redesigns, and how we can work very closely with each of you. But we are quite a small organisation, having said that, so we want to work right across the nation as much as we can. Thank you, Sue.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much, Claire. And as Claire said, all of our patient member organisations offer a variety of different support in a variety of different models. Dale, before we come on to questions, I'm wondering if you would like to say anything about other ways of offering patient support, and particularly what NAS has to offer.
Thanks, Sue. First of all, kudos to Clare and NRAS for the amazing work that they're doing in this. And I think this area of work is going to become more important, not less important, going forward in the context of the current challenges facing the rheumatology community, where patients still can't access services, they can't access NHS rheumatology lines. They're still coming to us in our helpline services in higher numbers even than last year. The more that we can do to support self-management, the better, really. We did some pilot work last year in a co-collaboration with 10 rheumatology departments. And that pilot program showed that you can help people to feel empowered to live well with their condition, but also reduce isolation. But as important, reconnect patients back to the rheumatology team, as well as capacitate the rheumatology team in developing their own self-management support. So the work we're planning to do for the next 2 years is to extend that to work with a further 35 rheumatology departments. Again, capacitate those departments to provide their own self-management support, but create some e-learning modules and a whole resource library for clinicians so they can provide self-management support in consult with a patient organisation. So I think this is core territory for patient organisations to be involved with, but we definitely want to do it in collaboration with rheumatology.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. And do make sure that you are aware of all our different patient member organisations and what they have to offer, because they do all offer all kinds of valuable things. But we're now going to move to answering the questions that you've been putting in the Q&A box. And the first one is very much for Dale. So do the speakers think that the Aspiring to Excellence programme will show benefits for rheumatology patients with conditions other than axSpA. So I'm going to come to Dale first. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's a really lovely question, Rebecca. And I think the answer is yes, because what you learn through QI is a whole mindset and approach, and a set of tools that help you to bring that mindset to life. And I think one of the quotes in my presentation said, this will stay with them and they can use it in other areas. That's the whole point. None of this is axSpA specific. And in fact, these methodologies have been used, the first big set piece program in the UK was in patient safety nearly 20 years ago. They've been used in stroke, congestive heart failure. I was involved in some work in Malawi in maternal and neonatal mortality. It can be used in any healthcare setting, in any condition. And once you teach the clinician the approach, it hopefully will stay with them for life. So I'm not going to claim any big knock-on effects for other conditions, but one would hope that there would be some soft knock-on effects to other patient groups. Great question.
Right. And Claire, what are your feelings?
Yeah, I absolutely echo what Dale just said. I think it's learning those techniques of how to do that quality improvement, and then that will, it'll be easier to do it on the next condition and the next condition. And it's, I think in many ways, where you have best practice in some areas, sometimes it's very easy to think, oh, we've done a really great job, and you keep it within yourself. It's about sharing that best practice and connecting that the community to be able to learn from what another unit has done is going to be really important. So that I like that whole connecting of colleagues together to say this is how we've done it, and it's actually not as daunting as you think it is.
And Sue, I also observe, having come into rheumatology for the last 4 years, having worked in other areas in quality improvement, that I think rheumatology has been perhaps slower than other specialties to embrace QI at the start. But now I'm seeing I'm seeing critical mass of clinicians talking about QI and doing it. Now the work of BSR and others, for example, the fact there'll be more sessions at the BSR conference about QI methods and webinars. And so I see much more sense of a movement, a social movement of people working together, clinicians. So I think, Rebecca, we will see some positive knock-on effects, not just in the work that NAS is doing, but the growing momentum of QI in rheumatology more generally.
That's great. That's good to hear. And I think the whole thing about learning from each other and using all the resources, including the patient resources, patient organisation resources, is a really important one. So our second question is from Alison and is directed at Claire, I think. What further plans are there to encourage self-efficacy and look at lifestyle factors that are contributing to ongoing disease activity? The GIRFT report appears highly drug-focused. Yes. Anything you'd like to say on that?
Well, I've made no secret of it that, when I read the GIRFT report, which we welcomed strongly, it was great to have that. It was very much clinically focused and more about getting it right first time for the service. We were quite keen to see getting it right first time for the individual, the patient at the center of things. And I think that's during COVID, the fact that we started doing our well-being courses that have proved to be incredibly valuable to individuals about how do you manage with your exercise regime and getting it what works for the individual and being more holistic about their care. But I think that's why I mentioned about always talking about supported self-management, that I think some patients can be very frightened about self-efficacy, self-management, thinking that they're going to have to do it all on their own. But it is about taking some ownership of their condition and understanding the role they play in their treatment pathway. And things like for rheumatoid arthritis, knowing your disease activity score, that's sometimes the best kept secret ever. I speak to hundreds of patients over my years at NRAS, and when we ask in a group how many know what their disease activity score is, very few people do. And I think allowing people to do their own disease activity score and measure it through either on their app or through an online way of measuring their DAS now called, that's been part of the Remora trial, is really going to be important, because then they understand that sometimes their lifestyle choices, how that impacts on their disease. They can actually visualize it, they can see it, that, you know, if they don't exercise, if they don't eat healthily, if they perhaps smoke, it actually has an impact on their disease activity. And the more we can share that and allow people to understand the clinical side of things themselves, of being able to measure their disease activity, I think the more engaged they will be, and better self-managers, and using the services then far better.
Right. And Dale, I know that NAS also does an awful lot of supporting people to manage their own conditions. Have you got anything you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I think the comment on the GIRFT report is well made. For me, sorry, I'm mid-COVID right there, bear with me. For me, one of the helpful things is the GIRFT report and so many other things are now nesting under the Best MSK Health program. And in Best MSK Health, in the pathways that have been developed, it's very clear the importance of lifestyle factors as one of the range of things to be considered. And those pathways break down the specific metrics to be looking for. So I think more broadly, this understanding that all of this is really important. But even beyond lifestyle factors and pharmacology, for me, physiotherapy and hydrotherapy are hugely important. We know that hydrotherapy services are under threat. Just this week, I met with Health Minister Ed Arger to talk about that threat as we perceive it at NAS, and some asks we have of the Department of Health in response to that. And I think we have to be vigilant to actually attempt to close down hydrotherapy services, but also even physiotherapies. I think there are certainly many trusts that haven't got MSK physiotherapists on board. So I think there are a whole bunch of things beyond pharmacology that we have to be really vigilant about.
Mm-hmm. And I think my other observation about the GIRFT report is that GIRFT does tend to be quite focused on secondary care. And I'm glad you mentioned Best MSK Health, because one of the real strengths, I think, of that programme is that it is system-wide. So it is looking at, well, this is what rheumatology needs. What do community services, what do primary care services need to have in place in order to respond to and enable the rheumatology services to do what they do best? And how do rheumatology services need to be set up in order to support the primary and the community bit to do what they need to do? So it's really critical, I think, to look at this across the board, because patients do not just see rheumatologists and rheumatology departments, they are also seeing GPs and physiotherapy services and hydrotherapy and a whole range of different things. One of the things that the ARMA is working on at the moment is a guide for social prescribing services to understand MSK. And I think there's also a lot of potential in using social prescribing more for MSK patients. So look out for that report coming out soon.
And just the other thing I'd like to hop in on that, Sue, is very few rheumatology patients are just rheumatology patients. As you said, they will be seeing GPs about other things. They may be diabetic, they may be undergoing cancer treatment, they may have other comorbidities. And I think it's, while I really welcome the getting it right first time for rheumatology, but it's also trying to see how do the different disciplines really link together, and how can we be more holistic in our care for our citizens, because they don't all fit into that one pigeonhole of having just that one condition. And I think that's where, again, the patient organisations, because we're all talking to each other, we can have that crossover and be able to signpost in the right direction for other conditions as well. Mm-hmm.
Other conditions, and of course the rest of people's lives, because people are also family members and employees and students and all sorts of other things.
Yeah.
So then the next question from Will is great and varied talks by both. Thanks very much. So the NRAS education package is fantastic. How do you test if the messages have landed?
Yeah.
So yeah, how do you judge whether people have heard it and are applying it?
Yes, and I think that's with the SMILE, the online learning, there will be a baseline questionnaire, and then there will be one at the end of each, and there are quizzes throughout each module as well to test how much they've understood. But there will also be follow-up questionnaires in 6 months and probably a year, just to go back and say, how are things going? What more can we do? Signpost them again, but also to test, has it improved the way they're talking with their healthcare professionals? How are they managing, whether their anxiety levels are lower, whether their pain scale is, all of those different domains will be checked on. And so we're using, as I said, the RA impact of disease measurement tool and that will give us a guide as to how much people are benefiting or what further intervention and help and support that they need. Because it isn't patient education and learning self-management skills isn't I've done that, tick that box, it's done. It's ongoing. It's always something more that people can learn, and at different times of their life they may need different interventions, because nobody's life is standing still. There may be some other outside influence. There might be another comorbidity that comes along. There could be, they lose their job, their relationship breaks down. So that can all impact then on their physical health as well. It's about how do you manage that? So it's ongoing measurement.
And presumably you're also co-producing your resources from the beginning with patients to make sure that they are actually making sense and clear to patients. Yeah. I've been involved in supporting a few NHS initiatives to produce patient information recently, and it is really important to test it out, because things which make sense to clinicians who are experts sometimes don't really communicate it as effectively to patients who don't have the sort of clinical background that the person who wrote the document has. Gail, is there anything you wanted to add on how you make sure that things that you're doing actually land with the patients that are using them?
Well, I think in addition to the quantitative things that Claire just described, actually in the delivery of the programs themselves, some qualitative feedback both from patients and from clinicians about how it's landing, how the whole experience is for clinicians, how the experience of co-designing with nasty self-management programs is landing for them as much as for patients, really how it feels. So I think a whole bunch of qualitative things that are built into it as well are important.
Great. And we've just had a question in. I think we're coming towards the end of the time, so we'll make this the last question, but I'm really pleased that this has been asked. What about plans for mental health services? We need psychologists, coaches working with us to help change behaviours and beliefs too. People need help to make change. And mental health is a hugely important issue in MSK conditions. So I'm sure you will both want to come in on this one. Who would like to go first?
I'm happy to go first on this. Thank you for the question, Neil. And thanks to ARMA, who's been doing some great work and leading the debate around this. We had an all-party parliamentary meeting on this topic specifically, and it's a very raw meeting, I have to say, where patients talk about it generally, but also in the context of COVID, how their mental health has been hugely affected. Often when I talk to rheumatologists, they don't seem to know what to do about patients and their mental health concerns. However, we have seen examples of NHS trusts that have made the case successfully to integrate a psychologist into the rheumatology team. Part of the work we're hoping to do next year is to work with NHS trusts who've made that case and understand what generalizable learning we can extract from that, and help other NHS trusts also make the case to have the cost case and effectiveness case to have a psychologist within the team, because we know the burden of mental illness and anxiety among MSK populations is significantly higher than general population. And we've got to start treating the whole patient urgently.
Yeah, and I definitely echo that. And we know in an ideal world, every rheumatology multidisciplinary team would have that psychological support built in. That's not going to happen overnight. So what we're currently doing for our membership, so those that become members, if we're having a wellbeing plus membership, which actually includes an opportunity to speak to a psychologist, and then if they wish to go on and have, you know, virtual psychological support, that's available to them at probably an easier way to access that in the meantime, because yeah, psychologists are not going to just suddenly appear into rheumatology, although we would wish it. And I think that whole emotional well-being and supporting people right from the very beginning of their journey, and normalizing some of the feelings that they might have, and you know, because I think it they can feel very much at sea and very much isolated and alone, and COVID has not helped that at all. But just realizing that this isn't their fault, it isn't something that they feel ashamed of, that there is support and help, and peer support can be vitally important, and that having other people say, yeah, I was where you were, and you know, this helped me. And I think learning from each other is something that patient organizations again can help and support with.
Absolutely. And on the mental health front, we know that peer support is really effective, and the patient organisations have a role to play there. We know that getting access to support quickly is important, which is one of the reasons we really want to see IAPT services made quickly available for people, rather than waiting until people are severe enough to need higher levels of psychological support. And then finally, to the point about coaching and psychologists and helping to change behaviours, I will do a plug for the ARMA conference for those who are watching this live on the 6th of December. And we do have a presentation on self-management, which is being delivered by a health psychologist who is now working with the Best MSK Health programme. So coming at it very much from that psychologist angle. So do look out for that conference, which has all sorts of other things as well as that session. But it just remains me to thank you all for joining us. I would like to thank our partners, AbbVie, who have sponsored this webinar. Our webinars are free to access thanks to the support of our partners. AbbVie have had no say in the content or the speakers for this event. I'd like to thank Dale and Claire for two fantastic presentations and for your contributions in the Q&A. I'd like to thank all of you for joining the webinar. I hope that you found it useful, and the recording will be available online and you will receive a link to it. Please do share it.